Hi friend, welcome to A Water Connection, a space created to learn, connect and multiply the power of a conversation to give visibility to the water industry. I'm Jess Borges, a passionate human who believes you should increase your water curiosity. Welcome to this brand new episode. Today, we're exploring new horizons and we're virtually seated not with one, but with two amazing guests. Darren Romain and Tyrrell have joined the Water Connection studio to discuss all things purified recycled water. Darren has over 25 years of experience in water treatment. He's familiar with all aspects of drinking and recycled water supply and treatment, from strategy to delivery and optimization. He's passionate about creating conversations around alternative water supplies for communities to ensure Australia has a sustainable future in the face of a changing climate and increasing competition for limited freshwater supplies. Shane, on the other hand, has over 17 years of experience in strategic planning of water and wastewater services and integrated water management. He has a passion for helping navigate an uncertain future by providing direction in response to future trends and shocks. He has been instrumental in advancing adaptive planning in the water industry. Welcome to A Water Connection, Darren and Shane.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Jess.
Well, this is going to be fun because today I don't only get to ask questions, but also choose who's answering them. Of course, feel free to jump in if there is something that you would like to add. But let us start with some of the basic technical concepts, Darren. For you, how can you explain to us what is purified recycled water?
So purified recycled water for drinking in the context that we're talking about is taking water, really well-treated wastewater effluents, so from our municipal waste, and continuing to treat it through a number of processes to get it to drinking water quality. Some people refer to purified recycled water for drinking if you recovered stormwater, and that's also another option, but really in the context of where we see the opportunity in Australia to provide sustainable water supplies, we're talking about wastewater today. So the purified recycled water for drinking takes that takes wastewater effluent and purifies it further through a number of advanced treatment steps. And wrapped around that is pretty much an all-encompassing management practice approach, which ensures that on a second-by-second basis that water achieves drinking water quality standards.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It could come also from stormwater, but yeah, depending on where you are in Australia, you might not have, I guess, a lot of volume for stormwater to make it feasible. And connected to this question, Darren, how is it? You mentioned already that is different from conventional wastewater treatment because there are some advanced treatment processes. Could you give us a brief description of what that is? What else is involved to take it from conventional wastewater treatment to purified recycled water?
Yeah, and even the wastewater treatment process needs to be modified slightly as well. So we rely on that process to provide some biological degradation of common contaminants in our wastewater. So, one of the major things is that we extend our residence time within the wastewater treatment to achieve that higher quality output. So our wastewater treatment plants need to achieve a higher quality output as well, just to feed to what we call a purified recycled water treatment plant, which is a mouthful. And that's why we use acronyms. And there's two different types of treatment. One we call RO-based treatment, and another one we call carbon-based treatment. I also refer to them as removal and oxidation treatments. So if we just focus on the RO-based one, because that seems to be the one that is most prevalent, and RO stands for reverse osmosis, which is a membrane type of process. Typically, you take a high-quality effluent and you, from the wastewater, and you pass it through membrane filtration, so a very fine sieving effectively, so remove all of the particulate. And that's good pretreatment for the reverse osmosis. That water from the membrane filtration is then fed on to the reverse osmosis, where a lot of the heavy lifting is done in terms of chemical removal. So the chemical sizes are too small to get through the reverse osmosis membrane, and they get excluded from the permeate, which is the product water that we produce out of the reverse osmosis. So between these two processes, we physically remove pathogens, so things like cryptosporidium, virus, bacteria, and then there's a final step after these two processes where either you just have UV or what we refer to, and UV is ultraviolet disinfection. Yep. But you can also have a higher powered UV advanced oxidation, where we add a chemical upstream of the UV, and we actually remove some of the smaller chemicals that may have made it through the reverse osmosis through advanced oxidation. But it also provides a high level of disinfection as well. So between those three barriers, we've done most of the heavy lifting in terms of pathogen removals. And then we have a final polishing step of chlorine contact, where we effectively, if any bacteria or viruses somehow manage to get through all of that, they're treated there. And this is all part of a multi-barrier treatment process. The final step, because our water is very pure, is to stabilize it for distribution, typically with lime.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because it's kind of, you change a little bit of the wastewater treatment process, and then you add all of these other processes. I had a question, like with these treatment processes, there would be a lot of energy involved in, I guess, doing this. My question was for you, Darren, as well. Is Purified Recycled Water, and we can talk PRW, I guess. Yes. That's how you call it. I don't know. Go for it with the acronyms. We have defined them already. Is this a more energy intensive and cost intensive treatment or alternative? And if so, is this still cost effective to use it in Australia?
Yeah, I guess it depends what you're comparing it to and where you're doing it. So let's just start with what you're comparing it to. It is not cheaper than our current conventional water treatment, where we take surface water or groundwater and treat it. If it was cheaper, we'd probably already be doing it. The problem is we've tapped out all of those conventional sources. So then you have to look at it and try and understand, well, what are the alternatives? And is it more cost effective? And that comes down to geography often. And really the only viable alternative for a consistent water supply, if you've already tapped out your surface and groundwater options, is desalination. And again, that is a question of, it depends. On a side-by-side comparison, just the treatment process, just the advanced treatment process, PRW is less expensive. But when you combine the more intensive wastewater treatment and potentially transfer of that water back into your network, those costs also have to be taken into account. So geography matters. If you're right on the coast, desal may be less expensive. It also depends on where your wastewater treatment plant is relative to the location of where you need to get that water back into your system.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because normally wastewater treatment plants would have been maybe a bit more isolated sometimes, depending on the location. And then suddenly, we need that water back. So we need to rethink about how to move the water back into this, which is a lot more than the technical treatment processes that occur. I guess related to this, and thinking a bit more about the planning of these systems and connected to this, Shane, how did PRW started being part of Australia's future water planning?
Well, in Australia, we've been pursuing recycled water reuse for a long time. There's a lot of third pipe systems. There's some in Sydney. There's quite a few in Melbourne and Victoria, where we use recycled water for non-potable uses. So using it for irrigating the garden, potentially flushing the toilets, washing machine use, other things like that. But it can be quite expensive to build the third pipe schemes, the additional network to get it from where the recycled water is produced back to where it needs to be used. And so for quite some time, for quite a long time, both in Australia and abroad, with the industry's been exploring the use of recycled water for potable uses, for putting in our drinking water supply, because it can be cheaper than distributing it back to customers to use for non-potable purposes. And the main reason for that is we can use the existing drinking water system to transport that water to customers, to people's houses. So if we have to build that system all again, it's very expensive. So Purified Recycled Water provides us an opportunity to utilise the effluent from wastewater treatment plants more cheaply than putting in third pipe schemes, and provide an additional source of water that's climate independent. So, when we've been exploring climate independent sources like desal, we've also been exploring any other climate independent sources, and recycled water is one of those. So it's really been put on the table as I call them manufactured water solutions, as one of the two really only viable manufactured water solutions that don't rely on rainfall and climate. And so it's become very important. It's been a long road. They've been doing recycling water for potable uses for a long time in other countries, like in Africa, also in the US. There's a lot of countries around the world that are drinking purified recycled water. In Australia, it's a bit of a potted history. In Western Australia, they've got a potable reuse scheme via groundwater. That's been a really great example of how you can how purified recycled water can contribute to the water security mix in Australia. There's other schemes that have been less successful to date. It doesn't mean they won't be successful in the future. It's been on the agenda for a long time. We've been exploring it for a long time. There's some hurdles to get over, but I think everyone agrees that in some circumstances, purified recycled water could be a great solution to our water security issues, and possibly a better solution than desalination in some circumstances.
Yeah, especially I imagine for locations that are really far from the coast, it's really not an option to have desalination there. And I'm thinking right now of I'm from Colombia, and we are currently, at the time of recording this, Bogota, the city that I was born, is doing water rationing and restrictions, because the levels of the reservoirs, that is basically all of our water sources, are really down because of the El Nino phenomenon. So I was thinking about all of these, and in preparation for this conversation, I don't think anyone is even talking about this back in Colombia. And then it is definitely time to start thinking about it in other sources of water that are, as you say, climate independent. And connected to this, Shane, what do you think is the role that PRW will play from now on in the strategic planning of future water services? How do we get it more popular, I guess?
Yeah, well, it definitely plays a role in all of our strategic planning for potable water supplies. So most of the water authorities around Australia, not all of them, but most of them are considering purified recycled water as part of the water supply mix. And particularly when you look at climate change and in a lot of locations, most locations in Australia, the reducing inflows into our dams is definitely on the table as an option. There's varying levels of acceptance of it as an option. Obviously, the community, there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community. There's a lot of stigma around it. And so there's an ongoing challenge in, educating the community, educating politicians and decision makers about the benefits of PRW, and about the risks as well, and how we can manage those risks. So, but to answer your question, it's being considered already in most places around the country. It's just not an option for right now. It's an option for when we can get over some of those hurdles, like community acceptance and also cost. So it can be cheaper than desal, but as Darren mentioned, it's often more expensive than some other solutions. So we've got to weigh balance the costs and benefits, and really pick the best solution for the particular location and situation.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand as well that that all takes time, and to be ready for the next event, we need to start thinking about it and engaging with our communities sooner, because this will all take many years, as opposed to other infrastructure projects, which can come to fruition in a 3 to 5 year time frame. This is more in the 10-year time frame.
That's right. And that's why it's part of that strategic planning and not maybe the day-to-day kind of operation that we have. I guess one of the drivers to explore this topic, not the only one, as PRW was a topic that I really wanted to explore in this podcast, was a report that you both worked recently called Moving Conversations About Water, Australian Attitudes to Alternative Water Sources, which is connected to what you was mentioning, Shane. This report is Australia's first nationwide research into everyday Australians' attitudes towards PRW and other alternative water sources. I had a look through it, and I'll leave it in the show notes for everyone that is interested in having a look. But a key question that this report looked into was how favorable the community consider alternatives like this. And I found really interesting that results show that, 19% of people have favorable views, which is good. 40% of people have unfavorable views, but most importantly, 41% were undecided. So most of this is because they simply do not know enough of that this is an option and that this could happen. So related to this, Shane, could you tell us a bit about what are the main reasons people tend to dislike the idea of PRW?
Yeah, well, obviously, there's the ooh factor, right? And there's been some instances in the past of where governments have asked the community about whether they accept potable recycled water as part of their supply mix. And it's very easy to run a campaign around the ooh factor. And I won't go into some of the successful ones, but interestingly, in our survey of the community, it wasn't the biggest factor. The biggest factor was actually uncertainty. The community was uncertain around what the risks really were. There's not a lot of engagement with the community to educate them around the risks and the benefits, for that matter. And that feeds into another key concern around cost. So the community, it seems, perceive that these are very high-cost solutions. What they probably don't realise is that in the instances where we are considering purified recycled water, it's not a particularly high-cost option compared to desal in some instances, as Darren explained. Yeah. So while cost is a huge factor for them, there's probably some education that we need to do around what options are actually available, what those cost to the community, and what benefits there are in selecting PRW over some other options like desal. The reaction was definitely in there, so that a lot of people were concerned about the water quality and around the health risks, but it was much lower. Those concerns were much lower than we expected.
That's good news. I mean, I guess people still need to learn a bit more about the process, I guess, that is involved in the treatment and in getting water to this point, and that will help it. And Darren, on the other hand, what are the main reasons that people actually would be open to this?
What we found was a correlation between people's lived experience of water shortages and the impact on their life, and the quality of their life, and willingness to look at alternative water sources. It came very clear that people who hadn't experienced it, and it's hard to imagine anybody in Australia that hasn't experienced some sort of water stress, but maybe they weren't aware of it. Or maybe they, didn't impact them at the time. So once people realize that they need an alternative water source, then that was highly correlated with a positive attitude towards purified recycled water. I think, I guess the prevailing attitude is if it's not broken, don't fix it. So why are you trying to, throw some more water in there into my mix of water kind of thing? So that was a key issue. The other one was if they've actually experienced PRW, there was a very high acceptance of it. So people who had known they had drank purified recycled water in some other location other than where they live, such as maybe in Singapore, the typical question is, have you visited Disneyland in California? If you have, did you know you were drinking, purified recycled water kind of thing? So just having that exposure and a positive experience, I think most people think, because it comes from wastewater, it's going to smell and taste like wastewater, where it actually smells, looks, and tastes like drinking water, right? So I think once you've had that positive experience, that it's not an issue.
Yeah. And the way I see it, like is it still a water cycle? Actually, we don't, even if your water comes treated from a reservoir, that reservoir probably came from a river. That river actually received some water at some point upstream of the catchment or not. And it is a matter of like maybe accelerating that natural water cycle process. And of course, in some places in Australia, this is not exactly the case, but it's how do we just accelerate that and help with technology to do these treatments so we can just reuse the water. So I think that there are a lot of like good ideas there onto how to reach community, actually understanding a lot more about what are the actual perceptions of people. So I really like that.
And I think you've hit on a key issue there, water literacy, and you kind of just went through a very quick literacy lesson there. But increased water literacy, people's just understanding of the water cycle really helps increase there was a very positive correlation between level of water literacy and acceptance of PRW as well. So that is something that we can invest in and move that dial. And we actually seen it in the survey where we asked same question at the beginning, would you accept purified recycled water in your drinking water? Would you consider a conversation on it? Unsurprisingly, would you have a conversation on it had more positive response than would you accept it in your water supply. But when we asked those two questions at the end of the survey, we found that the acceptance went up. So we did some inadvertent, I'm going to say, education through the 15-minute survey, where we asked, questions like, did you know that if you were drinking purified recycled water, that it would comply with Australian drinking water guidelines? And so, just little bits of education like that resulted in quite a noticeable uptick in terms of acceptance. So a little bit of education goes a long way in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think related to this, my two last questions before going into my normal three last questions, it was around what can we do in the future? Like what should water utilities focus on? And we talk about water literacy. I think that's one of the key points that water utilities can focus on. But I don't know, I'll start with Shane, but feel free to jump in, Darren. Is there anything else that water utilities should focus to improve the acceptance of PRW?
Yeah, so the biggest outcome of the study that we did was we shouldn't be afraid to have a conversation. Having a conversation about PRW and discussing where people's water comes from, what the challenges are in supplying that water, and what sorts of options we need to consider to make sure people have a secure water supply in the future. We need to have those discussions. We need to be open and honest. We need to have all options on the table, including purified recycled water. What we find is water utilities, they're largely government-owned organisations. They have a lot of constraints in what they're able to share. Sometimes that information is cabinet in confidence or is information they're not allowed to share with the community. I think as an industry, we need to have more discussions with the community. We need to do more education. We need to be having open and honest conversations about some of the tough topics that maybe the politicians and the government organisations might not be able to do. So that's number one is don't be afraid to have a discussion, be open and honest, and surface all of these issues so the community can start to get familiar with them. The second one's education. Darren's already mentioned it. We've got to work on educating the community about where their water comes from. A lot of people don't know what water utilities do. They don't know who their water utility is. They just get a bill and they pay it. And it's not a particularly expensive bill compared to electricity or fuel. They certainly don't know where their wastewater goes. A lot of people don't know where their wastewater goes. At least a lot of people know where their water comes from, but wastewater is is very much a dark art for a lot of people. So we need to educate them on where their water comes from, where their wastewater goes, how we get it to a point where they're able to drink it out of the tap and flush their toilet and have safe, reliable sanitary services. And the third one is probably, I think, taking responsibility for the public's understanding and acceptance of things. So we often rely on governments to do that job, and as an industry, we do our little part of water supply and doing our role in the water industry. But I think everybody, including a lot of your listeners, we need to take responsibility for educating our family, educating the community. At schools, we should be, people that know about water should be having discussions at their schools and going to the little presentations at their classes. We all need to take responsibility for educating the community and hopefully lifting the literacy, and that will then turn into people having more informed discussions and making more informed decisions about what they're willing to accept in their water supply.
Yeah, I think that even answered the other question I had, so we can just jump into the last three, which was all around what could all the professionals that are not necessarily water utilities can do. So to start wrapping up, we can't forget about our traditional pre-closure questions. So these are both for both of you. You can decide who goes first. But what do you think is the biggest challenge that the water sector is facing currently?
I think just the level of investment that we're trying to do right now to deal with this perfect storm that's happening right now around growth, changing environment, and infrastructure that has reached its end of life. So there's three things that are really driving a lot of investment right now, and finding the resources and people and everything to make all of that happen is an incredible challenge right now.
Yeah, and look, I probably concur with Darren. The biggest challenge we've got is there's a mountain of work to do to continue to get the level of service that we've enjoyed in the past. So that is all very expensive work. And it's not just the water industry. We've got to invest in roads. We've got to invest in the renewable transition. We're pursuing hydrogen. There's a lot of very expensive things going on in the industry. How, as a community and governments on our behalf, how are we going to prioritise the things that we invest in, and how do we make those decisions about what the most important investment is at a particular time? Because, to be honest, I'm not sure that Australia can afford everything that we believe we need to do to maintain the same levels of service that we've enjoyed in the past. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to educate the community so they can be part of that decision making? And how are we going to make decisions on things that are really hard for humans to get their head around, like a 1 in 10,000 chance risk of running out of water compared to a 1 in 500,000 chance of a dam breaking? People can't get their heads around that. How do we, even as experts in the industry, we have trouble getting our heads around that. So how do we prioritise all the things that our government needs to invest in and deliver for the community over the coming 20, 30 years?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And what would be your message to young water professionals that might be listening to you right now?
Oh, that there's lots of exciting things to do and lots of opportunity. Everybody I know is hiring, and we're all looking for ambitious people who want to change the world. And if you want to have a big impact on people's lives and the environment, there's probably no better place to do it than in the water industry.
Lovely. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I would say follow your passion. Even in the water industry, there's so many different types of things you can do within the water industry. And if you follow your passion, you'll be successful. You'll add a lot of value to the community, and you'll love going to work. So I really strongly encourage everyone to try different things, find what that passion is, and then pursue it, and you'll have a great time. As Darren said, there's so many opportunities, so much fun stuff to work on.
Lovely. Yeah, that's right. There are many things to try on, really, in a sector that it's tend to be small. So we need a lot of help with many things. And just to wrap up, why do you work in the water sector?
I've always had a passion for water, and I originally started off wanting to be in hydrology, and my passion was to convert, nasty old concrete stormwater drains into nice green areas. Apparently, 30 years ago, there wasn't any money in that. So I ended up going into water treatment, and it kind of just evolved naturally from there. And I guess what I tell people is, you get passion from doing things and getting good at them, and actually changing, how things work. So, I'd encourage people to jump in and give it a try. And like Shane said, there's lots of different roles that you can find in the water industry, and very likely one that will ignite you and make you get up in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I did environmental engineering at uni because I wanted to protect the environment and help create better outcomes for the community. And it very quickly became apparent that the water industry is a really great way to do that. So water touches everyone. Having good clean water and good sanitation is very important. But there's so many other ways it touches the environment and the community. It's about our waterways and waterway health and trying to protect those. It's about being able to provide livability to communities through greening and the water needed for greening and for irrigating green space and reducing urban heat. It really is one of those industries where you can have a great impact on people's lives and a great positive impact on the community, and at the same time doing really cool, fun work. And so, as I sort of transitioned into the water industry, I fell in love with it really. And I just have a huge passion for trying to improve the way we deliver water to the community and deliver better outcomes.
And once you're here, you realize it's the best people in any industry you'll ever work in, and it's hard to leave. So, yes.
That's true.
Yes, I've heard that a lot. Yes, I've heard that a lot. People really liking it for the people on it, and also for the values and the purpose that we're focusing on. So thank you very much, Darren and Shane, for sharing your passion with us, sharing your knowledge around purified recycled water, about the future of what this would mean, and about that amazing work that you did asking Australians about what they think, and now understanding a little bit more. It'll give us some steps to follow through, and then to really make this a part of our normal future mix for water supply. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Jess, and good luck to your listeners.
No worries.
Yeah, and thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Give opportunity to talk about water. Not that I don't do that for 10 hours a day, but this is a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, a little bit of a different thing. So thank you very much. And to you, my friend, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of our Water Connection. I hope you enjoyed this experiment with two guests. I had a lot of fun. Follow us on LinkedIn as Our Water Connection to hear all the updates and new episodes coming. You can hit follow on Our Water Connection on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform. You can also watch us on YouTube. Help us grow this project by sharing this episode with colleagues, friends, and family. Help them increase their water curiosity and water literacy as we talked today. So see you next time.